Hello, everyone. This is a special episode today, and I'm very, very pleased and honored that Natasha Silver-Bell is joining me and joining us on the C100 Global Wisdom Talk. And I have picked up for us today, Natasha, in very, very important, increasing topic, I would say, and that it's just woman with wealth and woman in wealth. And also, I've considered, there is in other interesting topic, what I want to discuss today is spouses in entrepreneurial families. But before we jump in our discussion today, Natasha, can you introduce you briefly for the audience? That would be great.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back again. We've done this once before, so we are seasoned pros. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that what I share today will be most helpful. Um, I think that in the end is if I could surmise, if people were to have an impression of what I do for a living, is that they walk away, whether they engage with my services or not, it's that they felt helped, they felt seen, they felt validated. I think those are really important pieces in building relationship and connection, whether in business or personal. So I own behavioral health organizations. I've been very blessed to um, just this behavioral health space really is, we have a world crisis going on in every country around the world, and helping families stabilize in their homes with mental health support practitioners, providers, doctors, clinicians, live-in support, companions is really how our multidisciplinary teams come together. And we do that wherever the client is physically in the world, or we create a stabilization process. So that's our main organization called Silverbell Global. That's me. And then I've been blessed to consult and invest in other behavioral health organizations because I do see where the holes are in what can be is effective and helpful and what isn't. I hope that gives a good overview.
That's great. That's great. So let's jump in, and I'm quite curious and I'm quite excited. I'm just a man. You see this probably.
Okay.
And can you pick me up and also my the audience for today? If we see over the next couple of years and over the next decade an increasing count on women in wealth, or also they become wealthy, whether they have created their wealth on their own or they have inherited the wealth. What is actually the difference between a man and a woman with wealth, just from your perspective?
Oh, thank you. So there's a lot to bite into here. So I want to be as mindful of just from my perspective, because there are a lot of data and studies out there that show what women do with wealth, how women lead is very different than how men lead. But I wouldn't say it's a golden rule. I don't think there are any 100% hard and fast rules, because I do know women who lead like men and men who lead like women. What do I mean by that? I think that there is a more team approach when women are at the helm. Women are collaborators by nature. We're communicators by nature. So we want to follow a conversation through. We want to have follow-up. Certainly me. I love being able to communicate effectively, and I don't want to set up meetings just for the sake of more meetings. What I want to be able to accomplish is effective and clear communication for each team member in each meeting. And I think, that old saying, clear is kind. And when we are clear, that as the leader or the boss, the person running a team or teams or communicating to their leadership team, which is what I'll do often, is that everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. And I think, I'm not a man, so I don't know exactly what goes through men's brains, but I'm assuming, and I have seen they want to be as clear as well. However, I think women by nature, although there is a competitiveness with us, there's also, if the temperature in the organization is set right, there's a real camaraderie of we can do this, isn't this great? And look at us go, and we cheer each other on.
Right. So, would you follow me on my perception that woman can be a new force with a lot of power in their hands, and that kind of, I would say, a new force can distinguish many, or compete also with many men's with wealth in regards of giving back, philanthropy, investing, and stuff like that. But my question is, and what I see in many often is that women have, in some cases, but also in many cases, not the perception of the environment that they are strong and powerful and have different approaches and stuff like that. And that could be followed in some cases that on the self-esteem of some individuals, women especially, that there's a lack at these women. What is your imagination? What will we see over the next 5 and 10 years? Is there an increasing count on women? And what does it mean actually for us, for the families, but also for the society?
This is such a beautiful question, and there's a lot of layers. So if I go off in one direction, please pull me back, because there's so much to be said. And this is really, I'm so glad we're doing this. And I hope those who hear this really gain something from it. And I think just to start, what I heard you say first and foremost is women in leadership positions, I think, do look at the environment, and whether just in the office, in their region, what are the goals and intentions, and with their organization. Yes, bottom lines are important, but how is it accomplished, right? It's not just A to B. It is, maybe there's a circuitous route. Maybe there's another thought process, which creates more stabilization, actually, for the company to grow. So I think that there's, at least I'm speaking from my perspective, when I approach a problem and I work a problem or a situation, I'm not looking at the immediate return. That's just not my head. So I'm going to speak from my brain. I'm looking at the 30,000-foot view as my brain, as a mother of three. Also, I think the way that we're hardwired, I know there's a lot of data out there to support this, but we're looking at all the different perspectives. At least I am. Not that men don't, but I think by nature, we are not as linear. We are much more, there's a lot more foundation that's placed in the next steps versus just let's get to that goal, check, let's go to the next goal. So I think there's a more strategic approach, mind-body kind of conversation that goes on internally, whether it's verbalized or not. I think you really hit a tender. I'm going to be very mindful when I respond to this, because it's a very important question you asked about women and how we actually see ourselves in the workplace versus men. You're right. At least for me, I'm not going to speak for all women. For me, it was and is still something that I contemplate about how I choose to respond when I'm meeting a new high-level meeting. How am I going to be perceived by this person as a woman? It's not something that actually verbally like that goes through my brain. It's naturally in me that, of course, I want to be kind, polite, and courteous and impress people, and I want to hear what the other person is saying. But I feel like there's always a perspective that has to be justified of why I am where I am. And that shouldn't be, but it is. And if you look at history and time, we're normally the care providers in home, as I was. I tried to do both. It's not easy. It's not recommended for me, honestly. I was divorced, so for me, it required a need for me to provide, which I'm grateful that the opening was there. And I have very resilient, motivated, entrepreneurial mind children because of it. So there's the win-win of it. So I'm going to pause there because you asked several layered questions and I don't want to miss any of them.
So I would be curious, Natasha, if you can pick me a little bit up on an example. How do you, and potentially you will share this with me and with us, how do you find your role in your partnership, in your marriage? What kind of tensions have you faced, and how do you have solved this?
Well, yes, there are moments in a relationship where one has to assess what are the goals and what's important. But to keep this at top of mind every day, that's an energy, right? So if I'm putting energy to my partner, I'm not putting energy, let's say, to the organization. And there is a yin yang to it all. And so, having deep, mindful, kind of like family meetings with your partner is really important and something I excel at doing. And ask my partner to show up and say, where are our goals? What's important to you? Here's what's important to me. And how are we going to recognize that? My partner has been incredibly supportive. We've been together 13 years, and he is actually the person who cheered me on the most. So he believed in me and encouraged me, and he's a very successful person in his own right. And so as I grew in my ability to perform, I think it exceeded not only his expectations, my own, and everyone else who knew me. And now where I sit from my perspective, there were some hardships. And so being able to communicate, and it's almost as if you don't know what you need to communicate until let's say issues are at hand, right? So you can anticipate everything, right? And we were just speaking before we recorded about we can only solve what we're in is today because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So it's almost like the not transgressions, but the moments that are causing friction maybe in the relationship aren't seen until they've happened. And then you pause to go, there's a pattern happening here. And maybe I didn't see it at first, but he did. And so for him to bring that to my attention and say, this is happening, and we need to reassess what's important to us. And so I welcome those. That's what I do for a living, is have deep, meaningful conversations. So I welcome those moments with him. But yes, one has to be open to listening to the partner. But if you don't, a void can grow for sure. A separation can grow, and maybe that works for the relationship if nobody's saying anything.
It's great. It looks like that you and your partner are building up an empire, and that would be great. So, what I'm also curious about, Natasha, is what kind of discussions do you have in your marriage with your partner in regards of giving back? What I've learned through many discussions with women, they are completely different, right? As we as men. And
Yeah.
what is your thinking structure of giving back, and how do you come on the same page with your partner?
I don't think we are on the same page.
Okay.
He has his giving structure and I have mine. And I really love this question as well, because it's not just the golden rule, let's say tithing 10% of one's, net income. It's for which I do. And that is kind of a standard of as I grow every year, I'm growing in my giving. And my partner and I shared what we each give, and he was blown away by my, number amount that I gross or net, and then what I give. He's like, you're giving a lot. And, you know, I don't question. And I think that's one of the keys to my success is not that I have blinders on, but what other people are doing is their business. It's not mine. So I don't compare and despair. I don't compare and go, oh, I've got to keep up. I just stay in my own lane. And that it eliminates a lot of wasted energy. I look forward and move accordingly. So I like to, if you want to get into what kinds of giving we do, of course, that's another conversation, but we're very different.
Okay. Okay. So can you give me just some examples in what kind of giving do you follow in contrast to your partner?
Well, I mean, maybe state that again. What kinds of giving, like what kind of organizations or interests, or the process I go through?
It would be interesting also to hear the process in what kind of organization do you focus on?
Sure. Oh, yeah, my pleasure. I would love to talk about that. So this year, actually, or last year, I started a new foundation called the Megan Ann Foundation, and it's for domestic violence survivors and women who are sober, like myself, and are focused on, providing and being the best version of themselves to their children as possible through a divorce. And usually the dynamics are such that the father usually has more of the resources or the other partner, and they do not. They usually have none because they usually have young children, as I was. When I got divorced, I had very young children and no way to provide for myself. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was encouraged to not work when I was married. And so therefore, I didn't have skills that I could bring to the table when I got divorced. And I had no means for a lawyer, although maybe legally there was some representation that had to happen. And so what I have noticed a void, especially in the United States and around the world, is women having legal representation. So Megan Ann Foundation actually supports legal representation for these women who prove to be sober. There's a checklist that they qualify for in order to go through, but it's for domestic violence survivors that are sober and putting their best foot forward, and we support them legally.
Great, 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 great. And your partner, on what is he focus on?
Um, he has a family foundation to put people through college. You know, education is something that he really focuses on. Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
So, Natasha, I'm very grateful that you give me just the opportunity to look a little bit through your window, and I will spend the last couple of minutes with you on the second pillar. On the second pillar, what I've called the spouses in entrepreneurial families. More
Mhm.
often, these kind of women are not women with wealth. They are in the circumstances of wealth, right?
Sure.
And that could be in some situation a very strange situation for the woman itself. And what I've recognized is in very, very few people spotlight on these very important pillar in the family organization.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, very many men are take their spouse for granted, right? It is what it is.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to me, what is your perception on these topic spouses of, in entrepreneurial families? Because in the end of the day, they're very important. Yes, they are take the care role, take care of the kids, and that the whole organization will work well, probably. But
Yes.
also on the flip side of this, I mean, they can have a very negative influence on the whole family system.
Yeah.
And what is your holistic view on this topic, spouses in entrepreneurial families? Is it that I'm right that this topic is very under
Mhm.
underserved, I will say, and it should be more come on under the spotlight, that we discuss this, not only discuss but also to support these.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, had my partner been more demanding of my time or more quote unquote needing my attention, I wouldn't have been able to grow the way I have. I felt very solid in our foundation. He allowed me freedom to do what I needed to do to grow the organization. So therefore, it lended itself like a good soil to grow from. And the adverse, what you're suggesting, which is absolutely right, I have not had many conversations about what's going on in the home. So let's say, you know, the female is raising the children, you know, the wife is raising the children, and she's providing a fertile soil for the children to grow and become the best version of themselves in order to potentially take over the family, Gen 2, Gen 3, as we've discussed before. And how important that is, and to recognize that, you know, the entrepreneur, let's say the male in this case, is growing because of that fertile soil that is nurturing and loving, excuse me, nurturing and loving, let's say him or that person when they come home, to rest and restore and benefit from the family ethos that she is nurturing. And then there's no negative energy. I mean, there's family issues that come up raising children. That's just normal, but no reoccurring, I think, is the issue. When there's a reoccurring theme in a marriage that isn't dealt with, it grows deeper roots that are pull against that freedom that that entrepreneur spirit needs to grow. And so to your point, and just to pause and recognize to all the partners out there about what they're providing that spouse to go out and be a top performer is essential, because if you don't have that and you're coming home to fights, or you're coming home to a partner who's not there, or somebody emotionally unavailable, although the entrepreneurial person may feel like, oh, I don't need that, I'm fine. Actually, studies show that when you are nurtured and loved, you actually can grow in more love because your needs are met.
That's true. So, what would be your advice, especially for these females in this, let's say, very powerful environment? If there's a very successful entrepreneur, and you as a woman are very focused on to bring all the dots together and hold it together, potentially for him, but also for the whole ecosystem.
Mhm.
But in the end of the day, you feel alone, lost,
Mm.
without any support, because you have only your own ecosystem for support. And it could be in very, or in many situations that everybody say, yeah, you have everything. Why do you complain? What's wrong
Yeah.
with you? Right?
Yeah.
And you go back and say, I feel alone. I feel lost. What would be your advice, especially for these spouses?
Well, I just want to validate the question for a moment, because I work with a lot of high achievers in general, as well as, my own lived experience. And it's like, once you've conquered the world financially, literally, physically, what have you, it's like, well, what do I have to say for myself? Whom do I have to share this joyous moment with? And so, and yes, there's the giving back philanthropic, but that done in partnership with somebody who's walked a day in your shoes, been home every night watching you slave away to your passions, your hobbies, your interests in building something. If you don't have someone to share that with, it's a very vapid, lonely existence, to your point. And maybe we can keep ourselves busy. One can keep themselves busy, but eventually that loneliness does catch up. So what advice would I give to somebody who feels lonely? My question is, do they have a partner? And I think that's the answer is yes, that they would really need to have an honest conversation. I always advise doing things in the morning or early afternoon, never in the evening. Go for a walk together, go do an activity together. So when you have this deep, honest conversation, you're not just staring at each other. That can be like the worst case possible scenario. And if you have like a therapist or a couples or a coach or somebody who's helping you communicate, that's advised, because it's such an important conversation to be heard. So you don't have to keep repeating yourself, because if we are in a relationship where we feel really lonely, it's because we've allowed that pattern to continue. And so when we do recognize, maybe I will take this person's advice, and go and have an honest conversation, and I need support, write out your thoughts and make sure that you're doing something outside so there's movement and energy, so the tension doesn't build up and cause more issues. I hope that's helpful.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I will add to your point, we should more concentrate it to empower and encourage these kind of women, because they are very important for the whole ecosystem. And that is what I miss in many discussions, because the whole world is only concentrated on the man, because he is the wealth creator, and that is from my own or from my own opinion, just that is wrong. That is completely wrong, right? And we should focus on the whole family ecosystem. So there is also in an interesting question. What I ask you is peer groups for women, right?
Mhm.
I had this experience because I had a very good discussion with a colleague of mine. She's a female, And we had a discussion back and forth about peer groups for women. Yes, there's a 1 million woman club. I guess it's in the US and stuff like that. But she said to me, Jan, listen, all these groups are exceptional. They are great. You have a lot of discussions. But in many, many cases, you go at home, you sit on your kitchen table and say, okay, now what?
Yeah.
What should I do? And in picking up your example, she was also, who can support me to initiate in a discussion with my husband? Because I'm alone. I'm sitting alone on my kitchen table, and I've heard a lot of positive things.
Yeah.
And I will ask you, how do you encourage and empower these
This
kinds
is so important. I'm so impressed that you're asking this question. And I'm curious to know what you do too, by the way. Maybe we can have a little back and forth if you want to share. But I work with coaches and therapists in my own personal life. I have my person, and she will encourage me to have certain language, but we do need a conduit because there's such, not that people with wealth don't have high level conversations, but I think when you feel what's at stake sometimes by having this opening of conversation, and I think there's a couple, I'll give some real tangible tools. I think there's a couple different ways to do it. One, I really believe in the power of old-fashioned note writing, maybe text, but to do it, to sleep on it. Maybe you get your feelings out and your frustrations out at night, you journal about it, or you craft a text and you put it in notes. And then in the morning, you revisit. If you're on the receiving end of this note, what is the goal? What am I trying to communicate? I'm trying to create an opening to be heard. And also that means I have to hear where my partner is too. And I think that's the hardest part about this is that we have to be ready, let's say as the entrepreneur over here, to receive the partner's feedback, whether we agree with it or not. And oftentimes we may not. We like, yeah, well, but if we want to be heard, the only way to get what we're looking for is to also give. And we teach people how to love us, to hear us, and to see us. So it takes a lot of discipline on the other person's side as well to be ready to receive what your partner has to say. And that's the only way, honestly, you can get any movement forward. If you have been stuck and afraid to have this conversation, it's because there's more weight on the other side that needs to be addressed, probably too.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you just an example of my own
Yeah,
life.
please.
That's I would describe this as the hard challenge. And what I mean by this is just, and it could be hard for the listeners, but
Yeah, sure.
but if you're sitting down with your spouse or with your husband or with your girlfriend, it doesn't really matter. And you come up and say, listen, I don't need you,
Hmm.
but I choose you every day.
Hmm.
And through this clear statement, and it is just vice versa, to empower and encourage also the other person to, yes, come up with this.
Hmm.
Please say to me that you don't need me,
Hmm.
right? But come up with a clear commitment that
That's
I
right.
choose you and you choose me each.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is just an other dynamic. And
Hmm.
and yes, I see your point, and I have experienced this also. That is just an exercise that you should done each day in the morning, right? And
Yes.
there's just a different awareness. And also it could be probably that you come to the decision, okay, we had a great way together until this date, but for the future it doesn't fit for you and for me as well. What I mean by this is just be honest. Be
Mm.
honest with yourself and be honest with your partner on the other
Mhm.
side. And it is what I'm missing in many, many cases.
Yeah.
We lie. We lie to ourselves and we lie to the partner on the other side of the table. And in the end of the day, that is just my conclusion. You can't build an empire on based on lies.
Mm.
It,
No.
that's impossible.
Yeah.
And what I mean also by this is just bring, and I see this also what you mentioned. I mean, the key is communication. Be clear, be honest, right? But also have a clear and 100% commitment for your partner.
Yeah.
It's and also be clear that building up a great partnership is work. It's
Well, I mean, wiser words were never spoken. It is effort. It takes effort to be in a relationship. It is a choice. Love is not a feeling. It's a choice every day to be committed.
yeah, it's not in romantic fairy tale what the whole world is talking about, and that is also through my own experience. There is so many dynamic, and you see things from another perspective because you have a 100% commitment for the other person, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that is just a reset on my own experience, and hopefully it will be help. So I will come to the final round for today, Natasha, and I guess we can talk more hours on this quite important topic, and I would be more than happy if we can continue our discussion on this. My question and my final question for today will be, if you and I have the opportunity to meet us in 500 years from now, what is your perception on your own family? How will your family look like in 500 years? How will be, let's say, the environment of women and wealth look like in 500 years? What is your perception on this?
Mhm.
And what does it mean actually for the whole
Mm.
society? Yes, it
Wow.
could be that is a strange question, but I will challenge you on this.
Of course. My pleasure. What a fun question to play with. I've never thought that far into the future. So if our family bloodline continues as such, which one hopes, of course, that it does, I think creating, I would love to look back and see or be aware to see communities in a giving spirit. I think that's the piece that, sorry, I thought I had turned that on silent. Communities in a giving spirit where, you know, yes, there's an opportunity for the entrepreneurial creativity to always flourish and grow into new ideas, which by then, who knows what will be happening. But I would certainly like to look back and see that our family line has continued in a spirit of what I always like to say is the best exercise for the heart is to bend down and lift someone up. So maybe it's all philanthropic by then. Maybe it's all about teaching, giving back, but not in a way where you're depleted. So there's a reciprocity, there's a cycle in one's day where yes, maybe needs are always needed to be, that's what creates the need to give and so on and so forth. Like we'll never be in like utopia. I don't think that will happen because of human nature, but one would hope that it's a reciprocal relationship for the giver and the receiver.
That's great.
Mhm.
So, Natasha, it was a very, very great pleasure to have you once again in the talk, and I'm very much looking forward that we continue these kind of discussion. And it is because it is needed, it is requested for not only for these whole crowd of exceptional, beautiful women, powerful women like you, but also for the whole society. And
Yeah.
you do an exceptional, great work. What you're doing with your enterprise. And so for today, it was my pleasure and my honor, and I've every time a lot of pleasure with you, and
Um,
it is great. Many many things, Natasha.
well, thank you. And maybe I'll put this out there that we could maybe talk to our partners about joining us next time and see what that might yield.
That would be great.
All right. Bye for now. Thank you.